I want to say welcome to everybody. It's great to see everybody and a great opportunity to talk about a very interesting topic this morning, and that's we're going to talk a little bit about solar. So let's get started and introduce kind of who our guests are and who we are. So I'll start. My name's Bradley Uken, and I'm the Chief Administrative Officer with the Wisconsin Farm Bureau. Bill, why don't you go from there?
I'm Bill Oemichen. I'm a professor of practice in law here at UW-Madison Division of Extension.
Good morning. My name is Karl and I'm the Local Government Education Program Manager with the University of Wisconsin Division of Extension.
Well, thanks, guys, for joining us. So solar is not necessarily a new topic. It's been around for a little while. And I want to tell you, if you're tuning in and watching this thinking that you're going to get all the answers on solar, unfortunately, you're not going to get that today. Today, we're only going to cover some topics. And I think that what we're going to do is we're going to provide you an opportunity to think about some things as you are presented with a solar lease that you need to think about before you sign that lease. We're not here to tell you that solar is great. We're not here to tell you that solar is the worst thing. What we want to make sure is that you make an educated decision for your farming operation and for your land. And so that's our intent today. So with that, let's get started a little bit. Bill, why is solar leasing an issue with landowners these days? And is it really just the flavor of the month, or where are we heading with this a little bit?
First of all, there's to moving away from carbon-based fuels such as coal and more towards renewable energy such as solar and wind. And that is set in Wisconsin state law. In addition, Governor Evers issued an executive order continuing to put momentum for the state to go down that path to renewable energy. And so there's a real interest by the state of Wisconsin to reduce our dependence on carbon-based fuels and move to a solar and wind future.
And of course, the federal government has made a push in this as well. So it's not just the state; the feds also have a keen interest in solar as well. So
that is correct. Yeah, and in federal law, there's also strong incentives, both from a budget perspective, but from a policy perspective, to encourage states to adopt more renewable energy, such as solar. So very much like the state of Wisconsin policy.
Absolutely. So Karl, when we talk about solar farms or renewable energy sites, what are some of these sites looking for in land and accessibility?
Accessibility is really the true key there, is how connected or can it be connected to the power grid? How accessible is the property to bring in power lines? And so the connection to major roadways and then major power lines and sub-facilities is going to be very important. So another thing is going to be your site conditions. If there's an ability to impede the solar, that's going to be a negative. And so having site conditions that have less impedances that might block the solar productivity of the site would also be a consideration.
So what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, is not all sites are created equal then?
That's correct. Not all sites are created equal. And actually, in the state of Wisconsin, not all areas are going to be created equal. Depending on the topography of the area, depending on how close the bedrock geology is beneath, or if there's groundwater issues, that could make construction a little bit more difficult. And so we have a reference in our fact sheet to a UW-Stevens Point map that was produced by a student there that illustrates on a county by county basis the different areas, different counties that have higher capacity for these potential solar farms and lower. Just because there's lower capacity doesn't mean that it's excluded. It just might mean that on a general county basis, it's a little bit more difficult compared to other counties.
Absolutely. So Bill, let's transition. There's going to be benefits to solar, and there's going to be challenges to it. And I want to touch on both, and again, make sure we're covering and getting you thinking a little bit about what some of those are. So let's start with the benefits. Bill, what would you say are some of the top benefits when we talk about solar to a landowner and a farmer?
Certainly for farmers and other rural landowners, and I happen to be one of those. And what we're seeing in the state of Wisconsin are contracts where the landowner is earning about $500 to about $1,200 per acre. And so it is additional revenue, particularly for marginal farmland that's not in the woods because you need to have the clear view of the sky, but more marginal lands on a farm that can be put in some other type of productive use. And in this case, solar energy. And so it's definitely a new type of economic potential for Wisconsin farms and other land. And it's an opportunity that people should very strongly consider. But at the same time, you want to be careful because there are a lot of developers that are out there looking for land to get under contract, under a lease, and the first offer may not be the best offer that you receive.
Right. And I think, Bill, it's my understanding with some of these leases that there is some annual increases to it. Oftentimes, when we talk about a 20-year lease, that's not necessarily always just a fixed rate. What you get in year one is what you'll get in year 20. There's annual increases to it, is correct as well, right?
Yes, then that's all subject to negotiation with the solar developer. And that's why it's really important to pay attention to the negotiation with that solar developer and what it is that you're discussing. But yes, there's different ways. You could get just paid a lease per acre. You could get a percentage of the power that's actually being generated off that solar array. So there are different ways to negotiate with a solar developer.
Now, so there's obviously some benefit. We can look at the financial side of it. We can look at the return on maybe a less productive parcel. So there are some benefits, but there's some challenges. What are some challenges in that you're hearing, Bill, from and that you've seen or hearing from landowners about?
Well, certainly the first one is the contracts are really long and complicated. And trying to understand legalese, I've been advising farmers for at least 35 years on how to understand contracts. And it's really important to review them and to know what the different provisions mean and to educate yourself up front. But separate from the contract, it's really thinking forward, what do I want my farm to look like? Not only now, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because that solar array is going to be there at least 20 years. And so is the solar array being placed in the right place on the farm? Are you sure that you're not going to need that land for some other use that's going to make your farm economically feasible? So it's really not just thinking about the present, but it's really thinking about the future as well. And the downside is when you don't think about those things in advance.
Right. Now, Bill, I hear a lot from farmers talking about taking land out of production because, you know, if you're putting it in for your home or the farm shop or your grain bin setup, that may be, you know, pretty small area that you're taking. But on the flip side, there are some very large projects being discussed, being developed around the state of Wisconsin, and not just in Wisconsin. Of course, this issue is across the nation, and we should be clear. This isn't just, oh my gosh, this is all Wisconsin specific. Oh no, this is happening across the nation. But that converting a farmland, you know, Bill, we're not making more farmland, of course. Right. And so this is a challenge of finding a balance of putting them out there, yet it is taking farmland out of production for, again, upwards of 20 years, maybe even longer in some cases.
That's right. Alliant, We Energies, other power generators are looking for land to place their own solar arrays. In some cases, they're leasing the land. In other cases, they're purchasing the land. But it absolutely takes land potentially out of productive agricultural use. Now, there's a lot of research being done on what kind of agricultural practices can occur underneath the solar panels. And in New York, for example, has done a lot of research on sheep grazing. Other types of things, so there's a livestock use beneath those solar panels. But again, it's really important to not only think about the present, but think about the future.
Yeah, and I think that in a lot of cases, Bill, I've heard landowners talk about it's important to talk to the rest of the family because this is a multi-generation. In many cases, when we talk land ownership, it is multiple generations are going to be impacted by this decision.
Absolutely. Farm transitions, if you have a sense that your farm is going to be going through a farm transition sometime in the near future, you need to talk to the family members that you think might want to stay on the farm and to continue to farm to make sure that they're fully supportive of this commitment. Because again, this is at least a 20-year commitment. And it's really difficult to break contracts. And when you break a contract, there's usually damages. So it's really important. I can't emphasize this enough to think about all the different ways leasing this land could impact your farming operation, not only for you as the present generation, but for the next generation as well.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying, Bill, is specifically on these pros and cons of it, is there are benefits. There's no argument about that. There is a financial gain to it. However, there are questions about long-term working with, transitioning the farm, the length of these, and also just the sheer fact that you are taking land out of production. And so some landowners may choose to say, this is a great financial gain for me, I'm going to do it. And others may look at it and think twice. I'm hearing from sometimes that standpoint of we're taking land out of production. I want to farm, right? I'm a farmer. I want to farm, not necessarily farm the sun. So it's an individual choice. And we said that at the beginning. We're not here to tell you what to do. It's your individual choice. But what we're hoping to do is that you look at both sides of this, because I think there are definitely two sides to this issue on when we talk about the benefits and the kind of those challenges with it. So
absolutely. And use value, Karl, it works in use value quite a bit. There's definitely use value implications. And Karl, I think you might want to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so let's transition to that. What are some of the impacts if a landowner goes that way or is pondering this? What are the changes that they may see as we talk about to their land? Karl?
Yeah, so the financial benefit of use value is that it's based on the productive ability of the property, not so much the market value. And so if you're now changing that land use, how does the local assessor view that? I think that there's going to be this is going to be a case-by-case basis based on the local assessors. Local assessors are responsible for the municipal assessment in every single municipality in the state of Wisconsin. So it's really going to be based on what that local assessor determines. Some of the things, though, that I think would help make the case that use value is still applicable would be, what is the change in use? Can you still use that land, as Bill was saying previously, if there's grazing ability, if you have grasses that can be somehow grazed or harvested beneath because of the elevation of the solar panels, that would give you more of a argument that yes, we can still use it as ag. However, if there's no use of agricultural benefit or no agricultural benefit, then it's going to be a harder case to make. Also, what are some of the local zoning changes? If zoning changes had to be made in order for the solar array to go in, that would make it harder, I believe, for the case to be made that use value is still applicable.
Well, let's focus on two parts of that answer. Let's the zoning side of things. Let's start with that. That would not necessarily be the responsibility of the landowner. That would be the responsibility of the solar company to look into. Is that correct?
That's how I would view it. I would say that this is all negotiable, and it's all going to be dependent between the property owner and the leasee. But I would say that would be something that would be put on the solar company, because you want them to go through those steps, go through those efforts, rather than the property owner.
Right. So if we're saying that's probably the role of the solar company that's presented you with a lease, let's talk about that use value. Is that something more, though, the landowner, in that case, the landowner should be looking into prior to signing versus the solar company? Where does that fall then? Where does that fall in the process to at least investigate that a little bit on the local level?
Well, I do think it's up to the property owner. The property owner is going to be the one paying the property taxes. They will need to do their research, speak possibly with the municipal assessor, see how they would be viewing this. Again, it's because municipal assessing is handled on the municipal side. It's a local decision, so it's really up to the organization or the assessor that's doing the assessing. And so I would, if I was a property owner looking at this type of a consideration, I would be doing my homework, looking at talking to the municipal assessor and seeing what they think that the change would create.
So we're back to doing your homework. So we've mentioned it several times, but you just mentioned again another item to add to that homework list. So as we kind of are thinking about wrapping up here a little bit, we've kind of talked about just a handful of topics, but let's kind of wrap this up with maybe a little bit of a summary of what would you two recommend that a landowner do? They get in the mail a copy of a lease from a company they've probably never heard of, or they have someone stop in their driveway and say, hey, we want to offer you a lease for solar. What should be some of those steps? And we've covered those, but let's kind of summarize here and kind of wrap this up of what are some things they really need to be doing and really need to be thinking about moving forward before they sign.
I would say the first thing is you need to have legal representation. You want to make sure that whomever is reviewing that potential lease knows what they're reviewing and knows the terms and conditions. If you've got a legal background, that's great. Most of us don't. I would say that getting a person or a team of people that can look at the conditions and terms that are being proposed and recognizing that the initial conditions and terms can be negotiated. So the first offer doesn't have to be the final offer.
I would just add to that, think in advance before you ever talk to the solar developer about what kind of opportunity does this present for your farm, where it could be located, the solar array, where it probably shouldn't go because you're planning 10 years or 20 years to do some kind of modernization of part of the farm or an expansion of the farm. And then, as Karl said, once you're talking to the attorney, and he also mentioned talking to your local government officials, find out from your town board, if you're in a town, for example, whether or not there's any local ordinances that might put up some barriers to this. Find out from the local assessor, as Karl mentioned, whether or not this would have some implications for your use value taxation. Do your homework up front. We're educators at UW Madison. It's not a surprise that we say that, but you don't want to just, once you get that letter or they show up in your farm driveway, to say, hey, yeah, let's start having a conversation. Let's start negotiating. No, they have the advantage of negotiating. Many of these agreements, you've probably not negotiated one as a landowner. You need to do your work up front. And as Karl said, consult with an attorney before you sign anything. And that attorney will help give you guidance on how to best negotiate as well.
So what I'm hearing from the two of you is again, while the money offer is important, it's not the number one thing that you need to be considering. There is a list of items that you need to be considering. And again, the money's may be good, it may be great, but there's a lot of other factors to consider in addition to the money offer for leasing that land for solar.
Absolutely. And we didn't have time to go through all of those different considerations, much less talking about what a contract looks like and what the provisions might mean for you. But those are things that we'll be talking about in future video chats, as well as at the Farm Bureau annual meeting this fall.
Yeah, so Bill, you're giving me a good transition. So I want to thank the two of you, Karl and Bill, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure visiting with you on this topic. It is important for the state of Wisconsin, and it's important for landowners across the state. As far as this video, we're going to break this into a couple segments. This video will be on our website. It'll be on the Extensions website, so you can Google that. We are also in the process of producing sort of a fact sheet that does go into a little bit more detail on all of these subjects and a few more that we didn't get covered today. So again, that also will be both on the Farm Bureau's and the Extensions website. And then, as Bill mentioned, Bill and I will be doing a very similar session, a little more extended time at the Wisconsin Farm Bureau Annual Meeting coming up in December. So again, we hope that these are some good resources for you as an individual and you as your family and as a landowner. And, you know, we hope that this provides you a little bit of opportunity to think about this before you sign. And that's the key to it. Do your homework. So with that, thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Brett.